My name is Brian Kamenker. I live in a Boston suburb with my wife and 2 children, both in the public schools. A year ago, all the public schools in my town hosted a traveling exhibit described to parents as multicultural families helping fight racism. My son's class spent a great deal of time with it. One evening I went and looked at it, and I saw a few photos of biracial couples, but then photos of homosexual couples. There were accompanying descriptions, supposedly written by children, describing how they were all working to cure their parents of their racist and homophobic sentiments, since all types of families are good. None of this had been described to parents. When I complained, a school official dismissed me as being intolerant. Then one day I was looking through my 11-year-old daughter's health class workbook. I noticed that one of the stated goals of the course was that the children should, quote, appreciate and take pride in your sexual orientation. What's that all about? The principal told me he supported the course and saw no reason to ask that any changes in it be made. Our local high school, both last year and this year, had gay appreciation days. Parents found their children coming home with pamphlets saying, if you've never slept with a person of the same sex, how do you know that you wouldn't prefer that? That same day, English and math classes were taken to assemblies on transgender issues, that is, describing as completely normal people who have sex change operations and men who dress as women, and also assemblies where children are encouraged to come out as homosexuals. Parents who complained were told that, quote, they just didn't understand, and that this isn't about sex, it's about civil rights and tolerance. These same stories have been heard from all over Massachusetts. At a high school near Gloucester, parents complained an English class had their kids writing about gay behavior. In Concord, parents found out their students were being taught gay history in social studies class. In Needham, parents found out that kids had been taken to an assembly on homosexuality. They were told that it was just to promote student safety. The state of Massachusetts works with a national homosexual activist organization called GLSEN, the Gay and Lesbian Straight Education Network, not only to promote these activities, but in addition to fund so-called gay-straight alliance clubs in public schools across the state. GLSEN has set up over 700 of these clubs nationwide, and over 185 of them are in Massachusetts. These clubs are set up to attract troubled kids. They present an image of being cool and give the kids a new identity. They are told that they are troubled because they're really gay. They're invited to gay events such as campouts and proms and other activities. These clubs are purposefully organized to keep parents or any outsiders from knowing what goes on. I was told by one school principal that parents are specifically not told about their children's participation in any gay-related activities. One mother from a western suburb told me how she found out that her son had been involved with these gay-straight alliance meetings, and that she found out that the kids had been watching an R-rated movie about 2 boys having a love affair. No one at the school would talk about it, although it was not denied by the officials. She also found other provocative homosexual-oriented materials in his room from the gay-straight alliance clubs. The principal would not look into it, nor would any other officials. It was suggested that maybe she was homophobic. She and some other parents went to the governor's office and appealed to him for someone to talk to them about this. No one from the governor's office would talk to them. A Department of Public Health official finally listened to them, but afterwards would not return her calls. Later, the Boston homosexual newspaper, Bay Windows, hearing about these parents going to the State House, published a blistering article warning that bigoted homophobic parents were trying to endanger the money for the state's gay school clubs. Each year, Governor Paul Cellucci budgets $1.5 million for his Governor's Commission for Gay and Lesbian Youth. Made up of homosexual activists from across the state, this commission has used the Safe Schools mantra and state money to persuade schools all over the state to accept the clubs and the activities. Parents and others who offer any criticism about the programs are regularly accused of homophobia and endangering student safety. In addition, the Governor's Commission does much of his work directly through the Massachusetts Department of Education and other agencies, we're finding out. On March 25, 2000, the Massachusetts Department of Education, the Governor's Commission, and GLSEN co-sponsored a statewide conference called Teach Out. Scores of gay-friendly teachers and administrators from around the state attended. They received professional development credits from the state of Massachusetts for attending. Among the goals were to build more gay-straight alliances in Massachusetts and expand homosexual teaching into the lower grades. Teenagers and children as young as 12 were encouraged to come from around the state, and many were bused from their home districts. Homosexual activists from across the country were also there. I'd like to turn this over now to Scott Whiteman, who, with a few other people, attended this conference. To say that the descriptions that he saw are every parent's nightmare does not do them justice. It is beyond belief that what is happening could be happening at all.
In considering homosexual programs in the public schools, one is always told that the goal is tolerance. It's not about sex, it's about tolerance. It's about civil rights. It's about human rights. It's about anything but sex, so they say. But when I recently attended the 10th Annual Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network Conference, GLSEN, I heard quite a different story. You should know that this conference was fully supported by the Massachusetts Department of Education, the Safe Schools Program, the Governor's Commission on Gay and Lesbian Youth, and some of the presenters even received federal money. The audio excerpts you hear on this tape were recorded at this GLSEN conference. My experience, and what you are about to hear, was likely not a unique experience. This was my first GLSEN conference, and the majority of the tape you are about to hear was from the first 2 workshops I attended. To think that I could have been so lucky as to stumble into workshops that are not normal for these gay student-teacher conferences is highly unlikely. I would not be surprised if you heard the same things if you attended a GLSEN conference in your own hometown. Some of what you are about to hear is extremely explicit. This tape is intended for parents and adults concerned with the homosexual agenda in our schools, and should not be listened to by children without parental supervision. If it's all about tolerance, why is the following question necessary?
Spit versus swallowing. I don't know about the calorie count of cum. All right, is it rude? Let's ask this question. Is it rude not to swallow? No? So it's in good bedroom etiquette to let clean over and sit out?
Tolerance. You just heard a public employee ask 14-year-olds if it was rude to spit rather than swallow during oral sex. David LaFontaine, chairman of the Governor's Commission on Gay and Lesbian Youth, and the man who is mostly responsible for the gay-straight alliances in Massachusetts, tells us, quote, "We believe very strongly that all students should not be sexually active in high school."
Okay, first question, what's fisting? A little known fact about this, you don't make a fist like this. When they do it, it's like this. This is a lot easier than this.
And then you work your way upwards. You put one finger, you make the 2 fingers, 3 fingers. Some people can take a hand, some people can't take a hand.
It's about tolerance? If gay-straight alliances are not about sex, why are the people who run gay-straight alliances telling students about fisting? What you did not see is the man leading the discussion positioning his hand and showing 14-year-olds how to insert their entire hand into the rectum of their sex partner. When I brought up a similar concern at the December 21, 1999 Board of Education meeting, Marcel Laflamme, chairman of the Student Advisory Council and a member of the Board of Education, told me, "You're operating under the premise that gay-straight alliances are all about sex. I'm speaking for myself. As a founding member of our school's GSA, it is not all about sex."
One of you is young lesbian who is really attracted to this other woman and is getting down to the wire where you're thinking about having sex, never had sex with a woman before. And this is your really hip GSA lesbian advisor. Who do you feel you can talk to?
Tolerance. If gay-straight alliances are not about sex, why are the students told to go to their really hip GSA advisors to get tips on making the first move? He is actually recommending the student to go to the Gay-Straight Alliance advisor to learn how to approach someone they've never had sex with before. As recently as Thursday, April 6th, the assistant superintendent at Newton North High School mocked one parent's concern about that school's gay day by saying that being gay has nothing to do with sex. Quote, "This is not about sex. This is about human rights," according to Jim Marini, the assistant superintendent to the Newton schools.
We always feel like we're fighting against people who say publicly, say privately that being queer is not at all about sex. And we believe...
I will have you. I'll further.
Excuse me. We think that, that sex is central to every single one of us. And that it's really hard, but particularly for queer people, sex takes on a really different meaning. And I say queer people because I think it's different for people that define as bisexual, lesbian, and so on and so forth. So we think it's really important to pay, as sexuality educators, to pay specific attention to the issues around sex, and sexuality, and sexual identity, and sexual expression for gay kids, and that saying things like being gay is not at all about sex is really a political statement, and it really isn't based in reality.
Tolerance? If the entire agenda is about tolerance, why does a Department of Education employee complain about having to fight against other public employees who say it is not all about the sex? Like the department employee says, quote, "Sex is central to every one of us. Particularly for queer people, sex takes on a different meaning." End quote. The statements to the contrary, quote, really aren't based in reality. Clearly, the goal is not tolerance, rather breaking down the natural sense of right and wrong of a child, putting him into an exploratory mode, and actually encouraging the child to put himself into a potentially life-threatening situation.
And what we do is have students go up to the board and brainstorm different responses, such as, if I was to come to terms with my bisexual identity, I might be willing to have, I might be willing to have sex more often if I found someone who was actually gay, lesbian, or bisexual, because I would think that they would be the only one. Sometimes students say, you know, I would want to have sex just to prove if I was gay or not, because I figure if I had sex, then I would know. And then they say, well, I would have sex with not gay sex because I want to prove that I'm heterosexual and not gay, and I want to see, and I want to sample. I mean, there are a number of different responses. The impetus of doing this is, once again, to put them in an exploratory mode, not only for themselves, but also for the possible motivations and situations that other students could be in that they're going to be doing outreach to through the various events and through the one-on-one outreaches in the classroom.
Department of Education employees help children to get into an exploratory mode with their sexuality. They assist exploring teens to get together and to have sex to find out whether or not they are homosexual. Again, the people who come into your children's school to discuss homosexuality intend to put children into an exploratory mode to obtain a don't knock it until you try it attitude about homosexual sex. Not only do Department of Education employees help these children get together to have sex, but they discussed how sex might be better. Perhaps everyone should pierce their tongues.
Is oral sex better with tongue rings?
Yes.
And there you have it.
A tongue ring is a metal stud that is often pierced straight through your tongue. Here, 14-year-olds have already learned that a tongue ring makes oral sex better. Massachusetts leads the country in supporting the gay agenda in public schools. We have gay-straight alliances throughout the state. Gay-straight alliances are after-school clubs supported by our government where teenagers discuss everything you learn from these leaders. Massachusetts gay-straight alliances are the model for gay-straight alliances throughout the country.
In Massachusetts, we have government support, essentially, for gay-straight alliances in a way that doesn't exist in any other part of the country. There are about 700 gay-straight alliances in the country right now, approximately 185 in Massachusetts, although that number is really questionable because whether GSA has any members or how active it's being, sometimes it's counted anyway, but roughly 185 in Massachusetts. The Department of Education, in conjunction with the Governor's Commission, has been giving out grants to schools to support activities, including the formation of a gay-straight alliance since 1993. And right now, those grants are up to $3,000 per school per year. They will be available for next year, starting May 1st.
There are about 700 gay-straight alliances throughout the nation. Over 180 of them are in Massachusetts. The reason Massachusetts has more than 1/4 of all the gay-straight clubs in the nation is that our state budget includes $1.5 million of our tax dollars to support these clubs each year. Contrary to the statements made from the previous DOE employees, we don't essentially have government support. We have government support for clubs which advocate homosexuality to teenagers.
We have a project and do a sexuality education curriculum. And it's actually a grant that you apply for. So many of you in DSA will want to be part of this next year in the future. Touch with us, but we're not talking to you about that project today.
You just learned that a Department of Education employee visits gay-straight alliances throughout the year to implement what is called, quote, a school-based HIV prevention program with a broader sexuality education approach, end quote. Keep in mind, this is the same woman you heard a few moments ago tell 14-year-olds that sticking your whole hand into the rectum of your partner is about intimacy. Is this the woman you want to visit your child's high school? Now that we've clearly established that the agenda is not about tolerance, rather sex, let me share with you some of the conversations from the workshops entitled What They Didn't Tell You About Queer Sex and Sexuality in Health Class and Putting the Sex Back into Sexual Orientation. Classroom Strategies for Health and Sexuality Educators. A Department of Public Health employee asked the students what were some of the possibilities if they were to go on a homosexual date.
What's another date possibility? I know you guys have been on dates.
You might be like sexual.
There might be, that's right. It's a possible reality. And sex, a number of different sexual encounters. There could be, there's some kissing, there could be some hand-holding, there could be some intimacy. Just, there could be full blown out on the couch, in the car, sex, too. I mean, we're not ruling that out either.
Did you hear that? All-out sex is a real date possibility. I thought that high school students were encouraged not to have sex. Yet this Department of Public Health employee, in essence, says, you're going to have sex, and that's great. But the presenters of this workshop were concerned that the students might not know what to do if they were to have sex, or whether there could be gay sex at all. Can a gay person lose their virginity? Is oral sex sex? All of these were considered very important concerns, which your child needs to determine on his own. Please listen.
Just wonder, what if it was like one of the first times you were having sex? How would you know what to do?
Well, like with gay sex, there's with the very sex, it's kind of assumed that vaginal intercourse is when you lose virginity, but there isn't really any boundary like that with gay sex, so it's up to interpretation. Right. So, if you don't want to lose your virginity, you kind of have to feel for what that is.
Right.
It's more
And what you're comfortable doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just probably means something different, like my virginity is something different.
Yeah.
I have this conversation with her girlfriend all the time, Nancy. My friend Nancy doesn't consider blowjob sex. She's like, that doesn't count as sex. And I'm like, if that doesn't count as sex, then the number of times I've had sex is dramatically decreased. Like from a valley to from a mountain to a valley, baby. It goes down. It becomes quality. But that's a reality. You're right. That's a real reality about what constitutes sex and what people's different definitions are from sex. It's difficult. But what do you guys consider sex? What's sex? It's entering any orifice, finger to nose. So does everyone agree with that? It's like any orifice filled with any part is sex? No? Like that was my one. That was my one. That's very well assumed. All right, well there you go. We can limit it. Like what orifices are we talking about?
Right.
Don't be shy, honey. You can say it. Okay.
Like
Your ass. There you go.
Nothing.
All right.
Something. Not like your nose.
The students cavalierly laughed at a public worker who just informed a group of children that he has received oral sex countless times. These students carelessly threw around their view of sexuality, as easily as did the Department of Public Health employee. And if sex is the filling of an orifice, can lesbians have sex?
I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. What is sexuality?
Right.
Is it penetration? Is it not? Is it only oral sex? What is it?
Doesn't feel so happy at all.
Yeah. If there's some thing that's a two-beating dildo, two-swallow dildo, how do I know that?
If I'm a guy, if I'm not fucking, is that real sex?
Yeah.
If it's just blow off.
And sometimes it's fun to experiment and find those things out.
Did you hear that Department of Public Health employee? Is effing sex? Who gives this public employee the right to ask your child if effing is sex. Do lesbians use a dildo? Can a dildo be too big? Can a dildo be too small? All of these are considered very important questions for your teenager. Even though these children were told that it is fun to experiment, our public employees still informed every budding lesbian of just what to do. All they had to do was ask. Following, a 7-minute discussion on whether lesbians rubbed their clits together. Questions like, how does it work? Can you show me? I will take you through this discussion, stopping to highlight some of the critical points.
Do lesbians rub their clits together? Okay, we have thinking, but do we have an answer? All of them. Are we talking globally? Okay, that's now the question, is it possible? Yes. Yes, it's possible. Any more information that we can share? Exactly.
The previous discussion was on how lesbians had sex, whether lesbians could have sex, and did they rub their clits together. The following conversation will give you some of the answer.
How does it work? How does it work? Does you want to do a little like hand diagram for us kind of thing? Like scissors? Is it like scissors?
Rubbing together.
So I'm asking, I don't know. Is this like on top of each other? Is this to the side? Your legs have to be spread? Like, what's the story? Does anyone know the answers to these questions?
A student asked the rest of the class if anybody else had done it, so that they could get a better picture on how these 14-year-old girls could have sex with each other. A Department of Education employee informs all the young women in the room that rubbing your clits together is absolutely possible. You can achieve orgasm from it. You can be stimulated from it. It is a sexual experience.
So now how does it work, though? So you lay on top of each other?
No, I've never done that.
Okay.
Has anybody ever done that? Like, I don't know. But it is absolutely possible that two women could lay on top of each other, you know, say these are like heads, bodies, and you can rub your clips before eyes. Before eyes together. So you've got stability. I mean, I guess you can do that, sure.
You can do whatever basically works with this one.
With this audience. Yes, I hope you learned something.
Finally, the answer emerges from one of the students. You do whatever works. Simply, that's the answer. That's the answer to the homosexual lifestyle. You do whatever you need to for sex.
And there's actually a word for this. It's not just rubbing clitorises together. It's called tribadism. Bring that back to Bedford. I'm a vocab word for everyone.
We were just going there and you can do it with your clothes on, with your clothes off. You can absolutely see a sexual experience. You can orgasm from it. You can get stimulated from it. I mean, it is a sexual experience.
There you have it. According to the Department of Education employee, tribadism is a sexual experience. Indeed, lesbians do have sex, and now your daughters know how. Not only were the, quote, normal sexual encounters described, but even the completely abnormal came into the full light of day. Fisting, a deviant sexual practice where someone places their entire hand inside the rectum of their partner, oftentimes up to their elbow, was given particular attention and advocacy.
Okay, the first question is, what's fisting? Anyone want to
The whole hand can enter either anally or There's jiggering and then there's fisting.
Very good. Actually, a little known fact about this, so you don't make a fist like this. When they do it, it's like this. This is a lot easier than this.
At this point, the gay male Department of Public Health employee positioned his hand open and pointed, rather than like a balled fist.
It's not forcing your hand into somebody's orifice or opening or hole or whatever you want to say that doesn't want it there. So the person is usually relaxed, there's often meditation. It's not like you're hurting anyone, it's not like you're doing any forced steps on anybody. It's usually, I mean, one would hope if you're two consenting adults, not that your way up to it. You can put one finger, maybe two fingers, three fingers. Some people can take a hand, some people can't take a hand, some people don't want to go that far. But it's often a very intense and deep experience and not an abusive, abrupt, painful kind of experience. So much else. I mean, again, some people do like pain, and I'm not putting that down, but that's typically not what this is about.
Good question?
No, it's not clear that.
All right, I found another hand over here.
Yeah, but people look like, oh my God! No, I heard some people it's like stuck it in there and like yanked it out. I wouldn't have. It doesn't sound appealing, you know what I mean? Right. It sounds like someone's pounding away at violence. Activism goes a long way.
Yeah.
And it can be for some people. It's really an experience of really letting somebody into your body who you want to be that close and intimate.
Fisting is, quote, an experience of letting someone into your body that you want to be that close and intimate with. This demonstrates clearly the two differing worldviews between heterosexual and homosexual sex. Homosexual sex forces homosexuals to attempt to beautify what is repugnant and bizarre.
My ex said she enjoys pain. What the hell is that about? Who wants to take that on?
The ugliness of mixing sex and violence is best revealed through the world of sadomasochism, S&M. S&M goes hand in hand with homosexuality.
I have a question. How do you draw that line? Like, let's say your person that you're with said, I enjoy pain. How do you deal with that? How do you know what the boundaries are? What do you... Okay. So they can take a variety of forms. Can it? Yeah? What are some of them? Spanking. Bondage. Hot wax. Hot wax. Right, so it's something that needs to be explored.
Public employees did not discourage violence and sex. Rather, they asked 14-year-olds to draw a line through experimentation, asking the students to determine how they knew what their boundaries are, and those boundaries are best discovered through exploration. These public employees are actually offering suggestions to children on how to stick their entire hand into another's rear end. Pardon my frankness, but public employees have coached children in lewd and lascivious behavior. What a far cry from the teaching of the 3 R's in school. When sexuality is taught in high school, the most banal and lewd will be taught. And what about all that money for abstinence education we're hearing about? You'll hear our presenter's opinion on that too.
I just want to also share with you some of what the federal government has said, how this money could be spent. It can only be spent on programs that teach, this is a quote, that a mutually safe and monogamous relationship in the context of marriage is the expected standard of human sexuality, and that any sexuality outside of marriage is likely to have harmful psychological and physical effects. So think about all the people you know that are sexually active and maybe yourself, maybe somebody else that's not married. Think about all that harmful psychological or physical effects.
Sex has been reduced to a cheap thrill. Well, what more should we expect from our children when those who are in charge of sexual education have ideas about sexuality like you just heard? Many people are not aware that the U.S. Congress has funded a federal abstinence program. The idea of abstinence is totally spurned by the moderator, who encourages the young people to think of people they know who are sexually active and consider what harmful effects they've encountered, as if 14-year-old children are the best judges of such. In order to get high school students to talk so freely about sex, you have to desensitize them while they are still young. If you can convince them while they are young that homosexuality is normal and romantic, they will have no objection to it when they are older and considering having sexual experiences. The following recordings were made in a workshop entitled The Struggles and Triumphs of Including Homosexuality in a Middle School Curriculum. One of the purposes of this workshop was to demonstrate to homosexual teachers ways to get around the roadblocks that parents, principals, and administrators set up to protect children from the moral depravity of homosexuality. 12-year-old children, who ought not even be thinking about sex, wrote on the blackboard comments about homosexuality which reveal how little they actually understood what it was.
For homosexuality, homosexuality, they said don't knock it until you've tried it. Like if you haven't tried a vegetable, how do you know you don't like it? That was interesting. And also, when did you decide to become a lesbian? And have you ever considered becoming normal? Questions like that, and they're playing the role in their presentation.
Don't knock it until you try it. 7th grade students equated trying homosexual sex with trying different vegetables, as if the two were comparable. No 7th grader makes these types of statements on her own. She doesn't even know what she should be trying. This teacher has indoctrinated her 7th grade, 12-year-old students to believe that experimentation is the best way to learn about their sexual orientation. In this workshop, the lesbian teacher-presenter let the group watch a video she had her 7th grade students prepare to convince the administrators, principal, and fellow students that homosexuality was normal and not about the sex. 7th grade students are in no place to make determinations about sexual orientation. Additionally, teachers have no right to make students participate in a curriculum which will override the moral choices of their parents.
So now what I'm going to do is show you one of the student videos they did on homosexuality.
Are there more women homosexual than men? And they're going to prove that there is nothing wrong with being a homosexual. At the end of our program, or the last program, there will be a series of questions in which we will pause the video to see if you can get the answer right before we actually answer it. And you enjoy the show.
As the MCAS scores show, a comprehension of history is lacking in Massachusetts schools. However, this lesbian teacher has found time enough to teach her students about the Greek acceptance of homosexuality. You are about to hear a 7th grade student tell her 12-year-old peers that celebrated homosexuality has a glorious history.
The word lesbian comes from the island of Lesbos, where Greek poet Sappho suggests her poem to women. Greek people encouraged homosexuality. In fact, it was considered normal for an adolescent boy to have an older, wiser man as his love.
Did you catch that? A 7th grade student just told her peers that it was normal for an adolescent boy to be sexually mentored by an older and wiser man. We specifically tell our children not to accept candy from strangers. We specifically teach them to say mommy's in the shower if no adult is home. But here, a Massachusetts teacher tells her adolescent students that they should be honored if they were sodomized by an older, wiser man. The actions of this teacher are reprehensible and without excuse. There is a lot of talk about prayer in schools. Regardless of the discussion, any suggestion that there should be a Bible discussion in school is automatically outruled. Yet our 7th grade student will gladly misrepresent to her fellow students what the Bible says about homosexuality.
What does the Bible say about homosexuality? If a person believes from saying homosexuality is not wrong. Traditionally, religion has denounced gay and lesbian relationships because sex was supposed to be only for procreation, having children. The Bible has sometimes been used to justify persecution and discrimination against gays and other groups of people. Many passages in the Bible, however, teach people to love one another, to treat others with respect, and not judge others. Although the Bible is sometimes used as a weapon against them, many gay men and lesbians are still considered a helpful guide in their life. And it doesn't matter what everybody else thinks. What counts is what you think.
Actually, the Bible explicitly condemns homosexuality as sin. There is absolutely no way to state otherwise.
Can homosexuals choose not to be gay? Homosexuals can choose not to practice homosexuality. That is, they can decide not to have sex with members of their own sex. But for most gay people, it is probably not possible to choose how they feel inside and which sex they are attracted to.
Again, the propaganda is well at work in this young child. She has already learned that homosexuality is inborn and unchangeable. The truth is that thousands of homosexuals have left the homosexual lifestyle, and many have moved on to fulfilling heterosexual marital relationships. In this presenter's emphasis on homosexuality in her classes, she told the story about a Speak Out representative coming to one of her classes. Speak Out is a tax-funded organization which coaches children how to tell their gay story to their classmates and teachers. This teacher told of her bad experience with Speak Out because he told too much to her 7th graders. He told the students how to have anal intercourse. What she didn't know was that particular speaker was in her workshop.
I'm that speaker who was at the middle school and brought up the topic of whether or not homosexuality was illegal. And the other topic was, do gay men go to rest areas to meet other men? And these are very difficult things to talk with anybody, even 7th graders, which is 7th grade class. And our policy in Speak Out is that you can ask us anything. And we will answer truthfully, as best to our knowledge, our experience. And so the way I felt about it was, even though they were young kids, we read the questions they had written, and they were very explicit, and a lot of them were about sex. And I don't know what the school policy is about sex ed and how much you tell the kids, but our policy is that we don't lie, we don't hide things, and we'll try to address it to the kids' level. So I tried to be very, at least the legal terminology of sodomy, and that it is part of our culture. And I wanted to make sure the kids were aware that it wasn't enforced against heterosexual sodomy, it was enforced against homosexual sodomy. And the other thing about stereotypes of gay men, hanging out at rest areas and, being like predatory kind of thing. I wanted the kids, because they had just seen the movie There's Something About Mary. These are kids that are 12 years old and they're watching R-rated movies. So kids are exposed to this and they need to talk about it. And they can't talk to their parents, they can't talk to their teachers sometimes, and they can't talk to their churches or synagogues. So who do they talk to? Well, they talk to Speak Out.
Speak Out, a tax-funded organization, will fill your children with homosexual propaganda in the schools with no concern about school policy, parental rights, or deeply held religious beliefs. Children are told to ignore what everyone else thinks, including their parents, about sexuality. A famous poem in homosexual circles called The Homoerotic Order by Michael Swift states, "We shall sodomize your sons, emblems of your feeble masculinity, of your shallow dreams and vulgar lies. We shall seduce them in your schools, in your youth groups, wherever men are with men together. Your sons shall become our minions to do our bidding. They will be recast in our image. They will come to crave and adore us." Before today, this poem was easily dismissed as the rantings of a rabid homosexual activist. Today, it is fulfilled by Department of Education employees. The Department of Education and many school districts around the state fully endorsed what was taught at the GLSEN Teach Out Conference. Our public resources, your tax dollars, are used to form gay-straight alliances in Massachusetts. There are 700 gay-straight alliances nationwide. Because of the support our governor and Department of Education gives to the homosexuals here, there are nearly 200 in our state. That means, on average, that there are 10 gay-straight alliances in each of the other states. 200 in Massachusetts, 10 in any one of the other 49 states. Do you wonder where your state will be in 5 years? Look at Massachusetts today. What will your children be taught about homosexuality in 5 years? Look at Massachusetts today. What workshops will your children's teachers attend in 5 years? Look at Massachusetts today. This is a short list of the workshops from the March 25th GLSEN conference. Ask the Transsexuals. Early childhood educators, how to decide whether to come out or not. Getting gay issues included in elementary school staff development, curriculum development, and the PTA. Lesbian Avengers, how to promote queer-friendly activism in your schools and in your lives. Strategies and curriculum ideas for addressing gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered issues in a high school English curriculum. Diesel dykes and lipstick lesbians, defining and exploring butch femme identity. And finally, the religious wrong, dealing effectively with opposition in your community. These are workshops about safety? These are workshops about tolerance? Are these workshops about civil rights? It is not about safe schools. It is not about human rights. Thanks to our Department of Education, we have proven that homosexuality is about sexualizing your children.
Ladies and gentlemen, what you have heard is truly beyond belief. Interestingly, the parents at my son's elementary school, a few days after that conference, received their monthly PTA bulletin, and among the news items, the principal mentioned that staff members from that school and others in the city had participated in the March 25th GLSEN conference. Quote, "The mission of GLSEN is to make schools safe and respectful places for everyone," said the article. That's what parents were told. They weren't told what really happened. Several days after the conference, Scott Whiteman personally presented an affidavit to the Middlesex District Court describing in detail the events that took place and demanding that an investigation and other action be taken. The clerk of the court refused to accept it. He curtly told Scott that the Department of Education has its own staff of lawyers and would obviously have taken the proper legal steps, and that it was up to Scott to prove that they hadn't. How does this happen in America? Think about this. For Scott Whiteman and the people who accompanied him, this education conference was a shock that words can barely describe. Sure, there had been stories and rumors, but no one could imagine it was like this. It was a mind-numbing experience. But none of the education professionals or any of the adults attending seemed to be bothered by any of it. In fact, Scott said that there was an eerie sense of solidarity in the air against, quote, those bigots, those homophobes who would stop our progress. That should frighten you. Our education establishment, from the governor and the head of the State Department of Education on down, appears to be completely and aggressively out of control. Nearly every state legislator seems willing to swallow the line that's handed to them, rather than risk challenging it by stopping the funding or even investigating it. This is a suicide issue, we were told. And after all, we don't want to be called anti-gay. It's not our problem, one state rep told me. Talk to the Department of Education. Worst of all is the media. At all levels, from the major newspapers and TV stations to the local weeklies, they treat our pleas for investigation with hostility and derision. To them, we're just Christian fundamentalists, even though many of us, including me, are Jewish, expressing our ignorance. In fact, gay school programs are often presented in upbeat puff pieces as examples of tolerance and safety. The big lie, ladies and gentlemen. It is the big lie. If you're too busy or too timid to stand up, then the world you are handing your children is here before you. Every single one of us needs to start by confronting our elected officials, legislators, government officials, school officials, teachers' unions, and teachers. What right do they have to do this to our children and to us? And believe me, they prefer not to hear from you. And don't be afraid to confront the media. Call up a reporter, a station, or an editor. Over the past 30 years, we've had America's cultural revolution forced on us from every angle. We've seen where it's taken us, and now we see where it's going. It's time for the counter-revolution. If you need help, contact us. The Parents' Rights Coalition of Massachusetts can be written to at P.O. Box 175, Newton, Massachusetts, 02466. And our phone number, a voicemail, is 781-433-7106. Thank you very much.